we'll wait for Lork a little bit, and then I'll probably do a recap for RPG and Joe since they weren't here last session, so you can kind of know where you are at the moment. And there's lots of
Okay.
options. I have no idea what people are going to kind of choose to do. This is kind of where the openness of choice happens. I don't have a particular plan for what you choose to do, but there'll be a number of options where people kind of will decide. We'll have a little opening scene probably, and then uh, maybe do some downtime. It just depends. I know a couple of people haven't played for a while, and then uh, and you guys will try to.
And let me make sure I have
Give
this
you
correct.
options. So go ahead.
This is my character, Lazarus.
Yes, I'll put them on the.
The other, the other one is Oh.
Yeah,
No, he's on there.
yeah. I
He's
just
on
put them
there.
on there. Yeah, we had a lot of fun with Lazarus because I used him for movement and tracking and you know that sort of stuff. He didn't necessarily do all that great even when I rolled for him, but it was that sort of thing.
We got lost
Yeah, we got lost.
every time we tried to go anywhere.
Yeah, it was pretty
It was a
funny.
fun session.
Even with his supposedly superior tracking skills.
Yeah, I did know better with the dice than you did, Joe.
Yeah,
they sort of got lost. They had that sort of trouble, but I did. I probably played him more often because he's the Pathfinder. I didn't necessarily play the other characters. I kind of just faded them into the background.
Yeah.
They narratively existed.
Right.
Right.
I will fade out Bartleby's character because his work job changed and he picked up a new class. So I will kind of explain how that happens. And so what I'll do is I'll do a recap just for Joe and RPG. Their characters Lazarus and Adela, to kind of how they got to where they are at the moment. So what happened is the group had one left ambassador from the elves, Eri-Las, and they decided they were going to go back up the secret entrance and the witch's stair through the Holdra's holdings on Karvosti. So they proceeded north. They ran into some black cloaks along the way, whom they had a discussion with. And these black cloaks were, at least for their experience, somewhat uncommonly benign. They were maybe even nice. Black cloaks, in their experience, haven't been in that fashion, and they had a fairly reasonable discussion with them in the middle of the woods as they came on each other. Can'dho and Guttorm talked to the Black Cloaks, and the Black Cloaks asked them if they had seen other Black Cloaks of, other of their brethren in the forest. And before parting, warned them that not all Black Cloaks are cut from the same cloth, and that the forest is very dangerous at the moment, which they obviously knew that. And they separated relatively amicably. Then they proceeded around the forest, kind of around the rim of the northwest. They trailed through the forest. Lazarus found them a spot, and they got to the eastern edge, over here on the map. And around Karvosti, there's about 800 meters or half a mile of open space so that the watch can see, nothing can kind of sneak up on them on the forest, as opposed to what the picture in Foundry shows. But they got somewhere over here in the forest, and it was near dark, so they decided they would wait. They wanted to wait till dusk because it was too bright, and they knew if they tried to cross that intervening space that they would likely be seen, or they were much more likely to be seen, and so They decided to wait. It was near the end of the day. They didn't want to go in the dark of the night, but they were going to wait right before the sun rose, right in dusk when it was still gray, but they still had shadows that they, it would be a lot less likely they would be seen first thing in the morning. Everyone went to sleep. Obviously, Can'dho went to sleep, and Guttorm kept watch. During the middle of the night, Guttorm heard sounds and realized that a group of people were closing in on their campsite. And he fired an arrow off into space and saw that the majority of the group that were coming towards them, at least towards Guttorm and Can'dho, peeled off to investigate that sound, and a single person continued towards the camp, and he was relatively sure that they knew exactly where they were. That person continued onto the camp, and Guttorm realized that it was an elf, and wearing typical garb of elves in the forest, leather armor, but they had this red handprint on their left shoulder of some sort of nature. He let the elf get closer, and then he put an arrow through the elf's eye, single shotted him, and the elf crashed to the ground, which woke up the rest of the party. And then the rest of the party, the elves crashed onto the rest of the party. These elves. Eri-Las fought with the group. He didn't really explain much about these elves. He did perhaps make a comment that they were a offshoot of the Iron Pact, but the company eventually overcame the elves, and the elves actually retreated or fled, mainly because Can'dho was, a boulder in the field. They could barely touch the giant ogre, and after a number of losses, they retreated and faded back into the forest. They decided at that point that they didn't really want to stay there or wait, and so they proceeded to the secret entrance at Thistlehold, and they found the secret entrance and the gateway, which is called Yppa's Gateway, or Yppa's Gate, or Yppa's Stairs, YPPA, and the witch Varama bound the will of the gate, and had the door open. She failed at first, but then eventually used magic to bind the gate, and they proceeded back up the witch's stair that they had come down initially blindfolded and with earwax. They obviously could not do that on the way up, and so they proceeded up the stairwell into this blackness. Along the way, Guttorm saw that things had changed, probably, even though he didn't have sight. He was blindfolded on the way down, but on the way up he noticed that a couple of the offshoot tunnels from the stairwell were blocked off by what looked like huge webs, and he asked Varama about it, and she also said that those weren't there when they came down the first time. But they proceeded up the stairwell. Varama was the only witch in service, really, and she was singing against the blackness of the deep of Karvosti that was pressing upon them as they're going up the stairwell and seeding them with corruption. Eventually, Can'dho had to pick up Guttorm and run up the last section of the stairwell until they came to kind of like a Y or T crossing. One of those crossings were completely blocked off by these giant kind of webs, and they proceeded up into the Holdra area and into the Holdra's compound, which was completely empty, which was to be expected because as they came out, the Karvosti was just mayhem. A huge, what happened was they came out of the Holdra's main doorways or main gateway here, and Karvosti was just mayhem. There were guards all along the rim and in the towers, and there was sounds of fighting and fire in the gate, way over on the eastern edge by where the gate and the ramp to Karvosti was. Eri-Las started to run towards the edge here, both Can'dho and Guttorm made an effort to grab him because their goal was to get him to the stronghold and to the High Chieftain, and they didn't want to lose the elf at this point. But both of them failed. Uh, Guttorm, Can'dho, and the rest of the party uh, found the elf at this edge of Karvosti, and he was looking down to the end of the ramp which leads up to Karvosti on the map, and he saw a huge elven host fighting against mainly the Ambrians and the men of Prios, men and women of Prios. It was a huge elven host. They were pushing the men back up the ramp. It looked like it was dire. Um, Wrath guards and barbarians were lining the edge of the ramp and the edge of Karvosti and the cliffs of Karvosti, and were shooting arrows down at the elven host because they had no idea the elven host looked like it was on a road to take over all of Karvosti. Eri-Las at this point needed to stop what would become war between everyone in Davokar, and he asked Can'dho and Guttorm to lend them their body and power to cast a spell, essentially. Guttorm was all in and grabbed Eri-Las's hand, and Can'dho kind of stepped away, not wanting necessarily to participate, having no idea what this meant, but ready to push the both of them over the cliff edge in case things went bad. Eri-Las cast the spell using Guttorm's bodily strength and his own to add power, and he essentially cast a spell called Illusionary Terrain and put this huge elven glyph in the air above the ramp of Karvosti. And so he put this huge blue flaming glyph in the air, and the elven host, seeing this glyph, faded and retreated into the surrounding forest and let off the attack. At that point, the corruption of the spell came into being, and both Eri-Las and Guttorm were going to share that corruption. Easily, the corruption could turn them both into abominations, but they overcame that corruption. It knocked Guttorm somewhat unconscious. Eri-Las was staggered on his feet, so Can'dho picked up Guttorm and threw the elf over his shoulder and plodded towards the stronghold. At some point, Guttorm came awake, and he dropped the elf. I dropped the goblin on the ground, and Guttorm got to his feet and followed after Can'dho as he carried the elf Eri-Las towards the stronghold. And that's where we kind of left off. Any questions or additions, Guttorm and Can'dho, who were there?
Only to say, we were straight up told that Eri-Las was using our resolve or resolute to bolster their own, and if it went badly, we were on the verge of turning into abominations, which is why Can'dho was going to push them off. It wasn't just I don't like them.
Yeah. Can'dho knew the risk and decided to take up position in case everything went bad or really bad, which there was a really big likelihood, but the dice rolls were in their favor at the end, and neither Eri-Las or Guttorm were turned into abomination. So I would add that there was a great degree of risk at that point. How about Guttorm? Do you have anything to add?
Yeah, you should see my shot from the tree.
Oh, yeah. No one saw that, so it didn't happen. There's no evidence for it. Nothing.
Right, it was a pretty impressive one shot, max dice,
Sounds
max
like it.
damage, right? From Guttorm up in the tree. after which, no one saw it. He claimed that it happened, but when you inspected the arrow and all, Can'dho was like, uh, could be anyone's arrow, and and
It fell.
yeah, Lascar looked at the arrow and said, "No, no, that looks like the goblins," but Can'dho was having none of it. So Can'dho, Guttorm, and the rest of the party are marching Eri-Las. Eri-Las is tossed over Can'dho's shoulder. Does towards the stronghold. Does Adela or Lazarus have any questions?
But at this
No.
point, no.
All right. So what I would do is have Can'dho roll a cunning roll, please. Okay. So Can'dho, you have the rest of the party in tow. You go marching towards the front area of the stronghold, which is about here. There's chaos everywhere. Obviously, that hasn't dissolved quite yet. And you come towards the front door. Now, there's still a single wrath guard guarding the front entrance, or the giant wooden double doors leading into leading into the stronghold, the High Chieftain stronghold, and the Wrathguard, dressed in typical Wrathguard armor, got his helm on and a spear. He kind of bars your way, Can'dho, and says, "Halt! Why are you approaching? They need you at the front gate." And he looks up at you, and, "Ogre?"
Got important elf to speak to chief.
He looks at you. Eri-Las is kind of still somewhat unconscious. Does Adela say anything, who's kind of standing behind Can'dho, as the Wrathguard, questions Can'dho why he's trying to gain entrance?
No.
No.
We'll see how that one plays out.
See how that one plays out. Does Guttorm or Lascar say anything? Just let Can'dho kind of do his thing.
Yeah.
Lazarus
Guttorm is-
steps in front of everybody and step aside. We need to proceed. We have business, important business, in fact.
Got smelly Ambrian as well.
Yeah, what I would have, I mean, it's obvious, like the Wrathguard is kind of going to know you, but it is somewhat crazy. You don't have very many Ambrians. So I think he kind of looks up at Can'dho, and he looks at Lazarus. He recognizes you, obviously, and you have this elf over your shoulder. He's not really certain whether that elf is from the ramp. Like he has no idea you went on this special mission. Maybe he thinks it's a prisoner of war, or you captured an enemy, because that fighting, like he's stationed here, and even if it's quieted, even if the yelling and screaming and the sounds of battle have quieted, he has no idea why that. And so he shakes his head and then whistles between, with two fingers, and a Wrathguard comes out, and he looks up at that Wrathguard and says, "Tolston, go fetch the High Chieftain at the gate. Tell him these have an elven prisoner he needs to discuss. Maybe he has information about what's happening." And Tolston looks up at the ogre, as most people would, and the Wrathguard runs off towards the high gate, and the other Wrathguard looks at you and says, "Just stand inside then. Stand inside until the High Chieftain comes, so I can keep an eye on you." Leaves you out kind of in the courtyard.
Probably should have gone to the main gate.
Do you do that, Can'dho? Do you tromp off with the elf over your shoulder towards the gate, or do you wait?
No, but Can'dho's just like, Oh, now I have to sit around.
Right, it won't take that long, Kandu. Um, uh, Guttorm, do you do anything specific as you're waiting?
Guttorm is looking over to the barn where he usually sleeps and feels kind of shaken about all the stuff happening on the edge with the corruption. But he wants to take a rest, but he also eager to see if he can get some acknowledge from the High Chieftain for this mission.
Yeah, you look.
So he's
Go
gonna
ahead.
stick around in the background.
You look. The barn is actually between the Holders Gate and the stronghold, so it's kind of like where your character's uh, tokens are at the moment. That's kind of like where the barn is. Obviously, you're here, kind of in the courtyard. You look across the way at the barn. It's still standing. It hasn't taken damage. It's not on fire. Maybe a sense of relief goes through Guttorm when he sees this familiar place that he's spent so much time in, that has been his place to sleep and place to work, and he's been seen at the top shooting that huge abomination that came up out of the top. It takes about 15 minutes, maybe 20 minutes before the High Chieftain comes up into the courtyard. He's got 3 or 4 Wrathguards behind him. He looks and sees who it is: Can'dho, Adela, Guttorm, Lazarus, Lascar, Varama, and you see his eyes widen a little bit. He looks haggard. He looks like he hasn't slept in days. He's wearing his full armor. He's got his sword strapped across his back, and he looks at his Wrathguards and says, "Wait here now. I will talk to these good men and determine and question the elf myself." And he kind of leaves the Wrathguards out in the corridor, and he walks past the group and he says, follow me inside. And he takes you inside the stronghold, kind of back in towards his throne room, and he just kind of collapses really on his throne. He takes off his sword and puts it on the side, and he almost slumps down in his throne, and he puts his hands over his head, and he looks up at everyone. He goes, "I hope you have some good news for me. Was that you all who cast that magic glyph in the air and had the elven host retreat?"
Yeah, that was us all.
He looks at Can'dho, who has the help still over his shoulder because Eri-Las is still unconscious, and he goes, "You did that, ogre?"
Elf did casting. Asked us all for help.
"Is this one of the elves from the mission I sent you on?"
Yep. Run into a lot of nasty ambrians, and sadly only this one's left.
He looks at you and at the group, and and there's a shout from outside from one of the Wrathguards. So he calls in one of the Wrathguards and gives him orders to take Eri-Las from Can'dho. Eri-Las kind of slides off. I assume Can'dho would give up the elf.
Yeah.
He has a Wrathguard. He tells the Wrathguard to take him to the second story quarters, and the Wrathguard throws Eri-Las's arm across his shoulder and practically drags him up towards the second story without any comment or question. The High Chieftain gets up and gets his sword and sticks it back on his back through the sheath, and he goes, "We would have many questions later, but there's much to do before we can have that discussion."
Always is.
Right.
Always is.
And he starts leading out through the front gate, and he looks at the group and says, "Get some rest, and I will call for you when we have a moment and things have calmed down some." Does anyone have questions for the High Chieftain before he leaves?
None from Can'dho.
Guttorm?
that I can think of
Okay.
right now.
Lazarus, do you have anything you want to say before he leaves?
Oh, you might be muted.
No, he realizes that we need some rest at this point.
Yeah, you're all a bit exhausted and banged up. You really haven't slept because you left as soon as the elves attacked you in the forest to come up the stairs. Adela, do you have any questions or comments for the High Chieftain?
No.
Okay. So he leads you out, back out to the courtyard, and you and his 3 or 4 wrath guards that were with him, he just leaves as quickly as possible, walking towards the gate area. And you all are pretty exhausted and need rest. Guttorm, would you rest in the stables?
Yeah, I feel safe there. It's my home.
Sure.
So
Now, would anyone stick with Guttorm, or would you all kind of go relatively your separate ways?
And who doesn't have like a dedicated sleeping area in this place because he doesn't live here. So probably stay with Guton.
Okay. How
Adela's
about
looking for a nice cot.
yeah? Would Adela go to like the barbarian area around the front when they first came in, which
Oh,
is
definitely.
yeah, which over there. How about Lazarus? Would you go with Adela, or would you go to the Ambrian kind of camp that's here? Might have been muted, Joe. I assume you went with Adela. So as you guys separate and drag yourselves to get rest, you probably noticed that the Ambrians and the people of Prios start dragging themselves back up the ramp and through the gate. They have many wounded. There's not nearly as many barbarians that are wounded because they were manning mostly the ramp and the edges of Karvosti, although there were a few. They kind of set up a convalescent or injury camp tents here kind of in the center of that main plateau, and it's pretty much chaos really as the Ambrians come back in through the front gate. There's some degree of not animosity but stress between the two groups because the Ambrians were camped out at the foot of the ramp, not necessarily under the guidance of the High Chieftain but of their own doing. But this is a neutral ground, and so they bring up their wounded, and barbarians and Ambrians kind of chip in, and people are running back and forth for bandages and water. The Huldra is involved in trying to heal even Ambrians, and there's going to be a fair amount of time that passes, a couple days. You all will probably sleep through this day, maybe even through the night, before you get a summons eventually on the next day from the High Chieftain. Does Guttorm do anything in that intervening time?
I still have the corruption, right, from the
Yeah, that temporary corruption will wash off. I will actually do that now since you reminded me. Temporary corruption should be gone. Most of the corruption you took during that event where you helped Eri-Las cast a spell was temporary, and because you didn't hit your threshold. So I should have cleared that. Yeah, okay.
Guttorm was excited to have a guest in the stables and runs a little in front of Can'dho and find him a nice spot in there, find some hay and show him where he can lay and rest. And so yeah, Guttorm sees him as a friend now.
Can'dho's on.
Yeah, Can'dho is clearly like the most gracious of visitors, and takes his nice, well padded sleeping spot as a general right of I'm big, you're small. And I don't know how much sleep you'll get with the snoring, but
Yeah, Can'dho doesn't
Can'dho's
have
resting.
Can'dho doesn't have a pen chance to really wake up, even when he's supposed to be on watch. And one of the back stalls, he Guttorm finds that you take over. Can'dho's almost as big as a horse as it is. He may even have some barbarians think he is a horse at first and like look over the edge of the thing and realize, nope, that's an ogre, and ease back up um, uh, as they're probably bringing some horses back into the stables. How about Adela? You sleep in the barbarian kind of tent city that's here outside the inn. Uh, do you do anything specific before the High Chieftain's summons?
No, I think other than, maybe some light revelry with the local barbarians, I don't think I do anything specific.
Okay. Um, why don't you roll me 2d6 for carousing?
I'm going to continue my research.
Okay, you could do that. 2d6, 8. All right. Adela, barbarians after, a tense event or war or even between enemies, that have called a truce, they get into their cups, they establish a bond, they faced death and survived, faced adversity they didn't expect, faced the chaos of the world and the darkness of Davokar, and so life needs to be living. And so Adela does find like out, even it kind of spills outside the inn, maybe even by the High Chieftain's order, like everyone can drink for free. He's trying to massage Karvosti back into balance, back into a safe space for everyone, and a neutral ground, which it had started to slide out of a neutral ground kind of area, and there was a lot of tension. So that kind of revelry spills out from the inn around the camp, and it gets pretty loud and pretty wild. Adela has a wild experience. Does she like party all night long?
I think she parties for quite a bit of time, yeah.
Okay, roll me a d8. One. Yeah, so Adela, you drink with barbarians, you drink with some Ambrians. The High Chieftain's ploy to get people back into a better balance seems to be working. You have a relatively magical night. You feel buoyant, really, and you can take advantage on resolute rolls for the next day.
Sweet.
And Lazarus, you were gonna continue some research. Remind me what that was.
It was elemental essence formula to concoct potions, I believe.
Okay. Yeah, so roll 2d6.
I think I had one, I forget.
6. Yeah, it's probably because the chaos. Really, it's really hard to do that research.
Too distracting.
Yeah, you get kind of stymied. You can't necessarily find anyone to talk to about it. The leads or the people that you may have want to found to talk to and try to get more information about it, you get stymied, which is perhaps to be expected in the into intervening time. You try that throughout the next morning. It's just that people are either hung over from the revelry, and the breaking of bread with wine, beer, and spirits. But you are stymied. You don't really find um, uh, progress kind of in that area. Guttorm, this and Can'dho, this is kind of the downtime rules, and I know I had you all kind of sleep and find space together in the stables. Would Guttorm do anything in downtime before the High Chieftain calls? I'll remind you of what those downtime rules are. Kind of the activities you can kind of do in the intermeaning. You can cultivate a relationship. You could gather intelligence. You could do research. You could carouse, which is what Adela did. You can center yourself, not necessarily spiritual exercises. It doesn't have to be spiritual, but it can be centering yourself during that kind of downtime. Would Guttorm like to do any of those? The last time he did downtime, he did some training, I think. But
Yeah, would that be like improving ability, stuff like that?
yeah, we haven't gone over that exactly, but it would. The way that would work is if Guttorm just wants to center himself, he's gonna practice his bow or practice a skill or that sort of thing. He would roll 2d6. Depending on the success, he may get nothing. It's just time, or he may get bonuses for using that skill once or something during the next day or the next
Yeah.
week. Or he may get 1 free EXP, or he may get 2 free EXP just to apply to that skill if he upgrades it next.
Yeah, I'm gonna do some. I'm making something small to shoot at in the barn. I can't sleep with all that snoring, so I'm gonna practice my bow.
Yeah, Guttorm, you find like a halter. They don't necessarily have draft animals. Most of the horses are for travel, but there are some that, especially Odavians, they have some mules, and sometimes they have one of those collars that are used to pull wagons. Harnesses, that sort of thing. And you probably find one of those, a U shape or almost circle, and you place it up on one of the far barn doors, and maybe you're trying to shoot, in that circle, practicing your bow shot. And I would just roll 2d6 or see how well that goes for you. Yeah, you're distracted, Guttorm. Sorry, I was muted. You're distracted, Guttorm. The horses are stamping. Can'dho's snoring is reverberating through. You can't really find peace or quiet. People are yelling and outdoors, and then eventually the carousing and the party in the distance intervenes throughout the night. And there might be some drunk people that come in and take a piss in the barn, and you got to kick them out. The people are moving through that aren't supposed to be there, or finding a place to sleep, and it just doesn't quite work as well. Your arrows go all over the place. You can't really find the center of that harness, and the most you get out of it is just practice, and you can add advantage to one bow use at your discretion throughout the next day just for spending time. Can'dho,
Yes.
go ahead.
No, I'm good.
Can'dho, you're sleeping. I don't know if it wakes you up. I don't know if Guttorm's restlessness and the arrow shot, thunk, 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 every now and then arrow hitting the wood of the barn, and Can'dho going and pulling his arrows out of the wood wakes you. Does it, or do you do anything, or do you just sleep through this time?
I mean, he will wake up because the sleep was mainly to recover. So he'll maybe roll over and kind of wince on a bruise because being hit with axes, like it kind of bruises you, particularly when it hits your bare skin. Like those elves were kind of mean, trying to like, and who might have a hangnail from one of those elves.
Yeah, he didn't take bloody damage.
Hitting that one.
He just
Like,
bruised
it
everywhere
kind of
and
sprained his
sore.
wrist and, yeah, like maybe killing them was a bit more damaging to him than like them trying to kill him. But he is going to spend like a bit of time discreetly shifting some robes with a bit more like bandaged on a sprained wrist or something like that, and would like to try and spend a bit of the downtime to gain some XP for Medicus.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that sounds good. You could roll 2d6. I'm gonna look at his character sheet for a second. Yeah, it's hard, Can'dho. You got really big hands, and the bandages are really small, and you work at it, um, and you get some skill, and probably enough to gain knowledge about Medicus. You rewrap and wrap and rewrap and wrap, but Can'dho is such a big boulder of a man, of an ogre, and isn't bleeding. He's bruised and all, but the only one you have practice on is yourself, and you don't really have any open wounds. So you kind of practice Medicus and push around on your muscles and bones, but you don't have enough wounds necessarily to do a lot. But I think just doing that gives him a better sense, and you can gain 1 XP to use to Medicus when you eventually buy that skill. I would just like mark it in your notes or something.
Yes, this is the second time I do it, so I've got +2 XP towards Medicus.
Oh, I didn't realize you did it. Otherwise, I would probably gave you a bonus to that roll since you already succeeded before. But the narrative effect is the same. So you spend this downtime, and it does take a while for the High Chieftain to send a summons, which is to be expected. It takes a while for the plain of Karvosti or the plateau of Karvosti to settle, and for the party to die down, and some semblance of calm happens in the afternoon of the next day, and each of you, a wrath guard comes to summon to the High Chieftain and bring you back towards the stronghold. Adela, are you sober yet?
I would say I'm about 15%. No, probably like 40% sober.
Okay, mostly sober, mostly on the half.
Right.
The headache is just starting to come.
Do we does it take more than a day in terms of recovering toughness?
Yeah, you could recover a toughness before the high chieftain. You can consider that kind of time frame. a 24-hour time frame for recovery of toughness. I have to look at each of your 9 and 19. Let me see if the holder can even help you. They're very busy, so it's less likely that you can receive, more than cursory look compared to everyone else that is wounded. But we'll see.
I can heal.
Oh, yeah. Lazarus can heal too. Lazarus is a little bit wounded. Can'dho is fairly wounded. Guttorm is a little bit.
I love that, like, even a little bit, like, fairly wounded, Can'dho probably still has more health than some other people who aren't so wounded in the party.
Yeah,
Probably true.
Can'dho's like Guttorm. If you stack two Guttorms on top of each other, they're about the same in structural stability, I guess. So Lazarus, if you were looking at them, if you looked at Can'dho and Guttorm, Adela is perfectly hale and has no damage whatsoever, aside from the fact that she's mildly intoxicated. Compared to yourself, Can'dho is the most wounded. You can tell, and you're probably slightly more wounded than Guttorm. Guttorm's wounded, no doubt, but in the scheme of things, when you look them over with your medicus eye, with your ability to kind of gauge that.
Well, would I know, like, it sounds kind of weird, but would I know percentage-wise, like, who is worse off?
Yeah, Can'dho is more than 50%. Like, you take a look at him, and he's like at that half strength. Guttorm is slightly above, kind of half, and he's probably a little bit more wounded than you. In the scheme of things, you're not quite at half. Guttorm is near half. Can'dho is less than half, but close to that.
One.
Maybe it's Can'dho's physiology. There you go.
There you go.
Lazarus, roll me a. I think this would be cunning at +3. Roll me a cunning at +3.
I have to put the plus in there, or just put 3?
I think you could just put 3.
Just 3.
Yeah. Yeah, you have no idea, Lazarus, why that didn't work, why you needed more time to figure out or to attend to Can'dho's wounds. You've treated a lot of ogres before. Maybe it's just Can'dho. Like, each one of them is different. You have no idea where ogres come from. But
do I think because he's like a different species?
No, that's what the cunning roll was for, to determine whether Lazarus would know, that would get some sense about Can'dho. But he just feels that it's probably because he hasn't healed as many ogres in the past. Can'dho doesn't need a lot of healing to begin with, but.
Right. So how are we feeling now?
Pretty robust. Pretty close to full.
Okay. Then I'll move on to Guttorm.
Okay.
So that's 2 temporary corruption.
Yeah, because you have the adept skill on Theurgy, right?
Strong gift.
Right. Okay.
Probably actually like 3 or 4 Guttorms at the moment.
Okay, just hold just a second. You might not need that second
Mhm.
roll. They might not need on a natural one. I double your roll for so I didn't apply that
For
last one.
healing.
Yeah, I doubled the roll.
Oh, for healing.
Yeah, so what happens, you, Lazarus, you move from Can'dho to the goblin Guttorm, and the same sort of thing happens. Guttorm's physiology, or maybe you haven't been around goblins as much, it'll get better, but you stumble a little bit, and then it kind of kicks in, and you have maybe a flash of insight, which is related to that natural one, and Guttorm recovers 4 hit points just from that first one. That second one you
Mhm.
rolled, you don't really need the third one, so I
Yeah,
didn't.
the second one.
Yeah, the second
Yep.
one
So
for
I'm full health then, ain't I?
So that's 4 plus 2, right? Yeah. Because the first one failed.
yeah, it's just 4.
Yep.
It's just 4 total. The first one failed.
No, you said you doubled. Yeah, but you doubled the second one.
Yeah, the second one healed a toughness of 2, and so you had a die roll of 1, so he gets 4 total. Which doesn't matter. He
Oh,
goes up.
because it
Yeah.
says heal. It says 2 healed. Does it automatically double it?
No, I do that on my own. That's a GM kind of fiat thing. GM decision on a natural one.
That's why I was saying that would be 4 then.
Right. Total of 4. He doesn't need the third
Plus
roll.
2.
Yeah, he doesn't
Right.
need the
Plus
third.
2 is 6.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay. Does Lazarus tend to himself, or does he feel that he doesn't need
Well,
it?
does he anticipate combat in the next couple days? Or is that uncertain?
Well, he can
It's
also
not sure.
decide before the end of the day, like before he left Karvosti. And so if Lazarus is not certain, what happens next, what may be asked of him, or what choices he may have, he
Right.
may.
Well, it doesn't really matter because I'm not close to my threshold. So
Right. So Lazarus can decide, like if he wanted to
I'll do it
recover.
now.
Okay.
Yeah, I'll do it now. I think it'd be different if I was close to the threshold.
Woo.
Oh, there you go.
Yeah, he rolls a 6 for himself. a 2, a 2 and a 1 and stuff for Can'dho. It's probably because Lazarus knows his
No,
own body.
Guttorm. Yeah, it was Guttorm that I didn't roll so well.
Yeah.
Did okay with Can'dho.
I think Lazarus knows his body very well, which makes sense, and he healed himself for a fair amount, recovering nearly everything. I believe that recovering everything. Like he has much more knowledge about his own physiology and muscles and bones. He's done this many times to himself, and it's a quiet time, so it's easy for him. And he probably heals you on the way, like, moving between you or right in the courtyard as the Wrathguard holds to make sure that you're allowed to enter and it's the right time. And you come before the High Chieftain. He's sitting in his throne or chair, and he has his sword next to him. He still looks haggard, like he hasn't slept in days, which he hasn't. The Holdra is there, and he looks up at you, and his face brightens a little bit, and there's some relief, perhaps, because of what you all have done. And you get a sense that he knows what has happened, at least from the point of when you rescued the elves and the track getting back to Karvosti, more than likely because he's already discussed it with Eri-Las, and he kind of nods at you and says, I've heard part of the tale. Eri-Las has told me much to commend you on. And he What about the first part? Was there much trouble as you got and found the elves? He asked the group.
I just kind of chuckle.
There's a few,
Everybody else is ignoring him.
maybe.
No, I was muted.
Yeah.
Elves are all sorts of trouble. No offense, Eri. Just, you live in the woods long enough.
Now, Adela, do you describe how you were found and saved by the High Chieftain, or is that part of the story that you do not tell?
I think I'd keep that one close to the vest for now.
Okay. We don't have Lasker here, so I think I would ask Guttorm and Lazarus if they would mention what they found about the Saars perhaps attacking or finding Odavians in the beginning, and finding a group of Saars and northern barbarians who had strung up other barbarians, especially witches. Or is that part of the story that you keep silent?
I would think I would share that,
Okay.
but I probably would consult him first and kind of look like what. Is he a barbarian himself?
The High Chieftain?
No. You said Can'dho, right?
Right. Can'dho is not a barbarian. Can'dho is this giant ogre kind of thing.
Right.
You have
So
to be
I'd
human
probably-
to be a barbarian. And Can'dho is not human.
Can'dho was
So I
present
would
though,
kind of
right?
look. I would kind of look to him
Hmm?
first to kind of. But I would probably share it because I would think he wouldn't care, and I would share it just because I would be concerned with a situation where barbarians are fighting other barbarians.
Oh yeah, Can'dho would not care at all. Oh, what are you telling any of this?
Okay. Lazarus shares a story about the barbarians they stumbled upon after they picked up the elves. And the High Chieftain kind of sits back in his chair, and you see this worried look on his face. And he says, "Yes, I've heard tell of that. We had a single Wrathguard return from ones we sent to the west to find out why the witches weren't responding. And they came back with troubling tales of the Saars and another northern clan had rounded up their witches and put many of them to the torch." This statement kind of gets a rise out of Laskar. You could see like he like perks up right away when the High Chieftain talks about the Saars and the loss of witch contact, and then also only one Wrathguard returning to discover why they had lost contact with these two clans. And his original kind of brighter countenance when you arrive, just darkens again, and he looks at you and says, "Do you have any other dark tidings to tell me to add on to my troubles?"
I would probably. I might be getting characters. I might be getting characters mixed up, and I don't know if this character was aloof or egotistical. I can't remember, or if that was Bo. I think it was Bo, actually.
Yeah, the only
Or
other
no. He's remember in the fight against what was it, the worm? Oh yeah. So Lazarus kind of basically shares his talent in combat and high skill as he tells the story. It says that he provided mercy at first because he came across them, one of them, relieving themselves, and showed him quarter, sort of, I guess.
But overall, he he like sings his own virtues,
Yes.
right? Which I think Lazarus is in Lazarus, right? He like embellishes his
Yeah.
part.
Well, I was trying to, because I have similar characters
Right.
in the other campaign. So I'm like, because they're both Ambrian. I'm like, I don't remember if I play them to the T Ambrian, both of them, or
Yeah, it's been a little while too. This is the first time back
it
since
has.
the New
Yeah.
Year. But that is kind of how you played Lazarus, like this, singing his own song. Even when he killed the giant, even when they fought the giant, abomination that crawled up the cliff, and
Right.
he kind of stood on his sword, like foot on the head, like look what I done.
I think he had the killing blow, just
Right.
out of sheer luck, I think.
And the High Chieftain just looks at you and nods. Lazarus, just for fun and giggles, why don't you roll a persuasive roll to see how the High Chieftain responds?
How convinced
Well,
he is of this.
he's under such pressure, like he may not hear like Lazarus telling the tale of his greatness. It just he's listening, but he's also got all these other thoughts in his head and concerns and
Yeah.
worries.
Yeah. Right. Any modifiers?
No, I think I would just leave it straight. I don't want to.
Straight up.
Yeah. Yeah, you are telling this tale about how you rescued the elves and the black cloaks and how you guys got out of the valley and kind of secreted them
Right.
around. And he's listening. You can tell he's listening, but his head is cocked a little bit and he's looking down at the
Right.
floor at a single spot. You can tell that, he's half there and half somewhere else going over all this information and all these things that you're telling him. And
Can I tell that he's
I think so.
maybe only taking in maybe half of it?
I think Lazarus knows that he's taking in the story of it, but he's not necessarily attending to Lazarus, buttering up his part. Like,
Right.
He's hearing it and all the facts of it, but
Yeah.
it's really like facts. Like this happened, this happened, this happened. It's not like, Lazarus showed a black cloak quarter, or Lazarus did this, or Lazarus
Right. Right.
yeah, he doesn't
But
get,
if Lazarus recognizes that pretty readily, then he would kind of retell the story, except starting with the giving quarter to the guy relieving himself.
he would tell it again a second time to try to
Yes. Yes.
No,
Probably throw-
you said that bit. That bit came after that.
Probably.
yeah
And if
Lazarus,
anybody tries to give input, I kind of ignore them.
yeah, Lazarus gets to the end of the story and then he realizes maybe I need to tell it again. He goes back and he probably gets like halfway through it, on the second telling that hasn't changed the factual nature, but the part of Lazarus in that maybe is heightened a little bit. And
Right.
and the High Chieftain, lets him go, like lets him ramble on until
Right.
to the second telling, and Lazarus gets the sense that he probably stopped listening halfway through,
The
because
second telling.
right, the second telling, because he's considering all these other things that are happening and the weight of being a High Chieftain, even though he's not necessarily in control of the barbarians.
Right.
He's more of a
Right.
nominal kind of negotiator
Right.
between all of them. And
Right.
then you get to the end.
So I get to the end and I will ask him, well, do you need us to go kick those other barbarians' asses?
He looks at Lazarus. There are many things I need from a group like you that can be quiet and resourceful. And
I kind of look over my shoulder, both sides, like, did you say quiet?
well,
Can do. background, but scratch.
Right.
No?
What the sense you get is that when you're acting for the High Chieftain, no one necessarily knows you're from the High Chieftain. Whereas if he sends Wrath Guards or barbarians marked from Karvosti, or a group that is obviously under his guidance, then everyone knows
Right.
that the High Chieftain has his hand in something legitimately.
Right.
Whereas when he sent you to get the elves, it was, can you do this for me? And if you get found out, then hopefully it won't be tied back to me.
Right. Right.
And he looks at Lazarus. He says, "Yes, yes, a group going to investigate the Saars. That is definitely something that I need." At this point, Lasker, steps up and looks at the High Chieftain and says, "Even if they don't go, I must go. I must see if that is where my sister has been held, and
Right.
she is kin."
Chieftain, is that your priority, or are there other pressing matters?
There are a few. Eri-Las must be returned to the Hall of Tears somehow, secretly, once things calm down. Once, there is not so many Ambrian eyes on the plateau. Once a more sense of stability and evenness happens on Karvosti, we must return Eri-Las to his people, and he can't go alone. And he looks at you and says, "So there are many things that Karvosti needs, or the High Chieftain needs, and many things that I could use a group that can't be tracked back to me. Honestly speaking, if you get caught, who's going to believe that you were sent by the High Chieftain?" And so the other things that he talks about are the middle clans. There is trouble with the Baegans, which, although is part of Laskar's clan, he tells you how the Baegans are being tormented by black abomination insects from inside deeper in Davokar, and they're making forays more south, and that concerns him also. I don't know, good man Lazarus. Between these three, the Baegans are fighting against a foe that we don't understand, that whispers say that are being controlled by some mother in deeper, darker Davokar. They've lost a number of cities. I have the northern clans, the Saars and the Goyans, have lost contact with their witches and disturbing accounts that they put them to the fire. I have the Baegans asking for assistance with this black foe from Davokar. I need to get Eri-Las back to his people, so I would have many requests of you. And he looks at the group and he asks you, would you work for me for any of those? Or are you going on your own way?
I think we're willing to escort the elf. And I kind of look at everybody else. I'm waiting for rolling of the eyes. Like, I'm not, not sure how everybody's going to take it.
No one has been to the Hall of Tears. You have no idea. Lazarus certainly doesn't. Why would Lazarus want to help take Eri-Las back to the Hall of Tears?
I think he's kind of made a connection and has overlooked the fact that he's different. He's not Ambrian, because of course Lazarus thinks Ambrians are superior to everybody else anyway.
Yeah, he was offered. He was offered by the by the Templar to go free, but fought for the elves and these barbarians and Guttorm and Can'dho, and he stood with them as the only Ambrian. Does he still
Yes.
feel tied to Ambria, or is he feeling disconnected, or different? Is that why he's
I think
choosing?
he's still. I think he's still feeling connected loosely, but uh, how would I put it? He feels like he needs to kind of finish this entire. I don't know if I want to say story, by making sure that this one elf, because he feels bad that the other ones didn't make it. We did. I think we started out based on my notes. I think there were three of them.
Or
There were 5 of them.
right.
Right, but some of them got slain in that combat, and then two more got killed.
Yeah.
So originally there was five.
Yeah, and at the end of that combat where they lost the two spring elves and
Yep.
Ghana Only was dying, and looked up, grabbed probably Lazarus' arm, if you remember, and sang that last refrain of the song.
Yeah.
Before she
So I
died.
think he feels like maybe not necessarily failed, but feels like obviously uh, he didn't, in his eyes, he didn't complete the mission to his acceptable level, I guess, and feels like the last thing he could do is to take the elf back to his people.
Adela, you are kind of in that High Chieftain, in before the High Chieftain, and you're hearing all these troubles with your people. The Saw-Ars, the Baegans, this elven host against you. Um, what's Adela's leanings when the High Chieftain asks if you will take on one of these tasks?
I think. Sorry. I think Adela was interested in the insects in the deeper part of Davokar, especially with the mother. I was going to ask, like, is there any information other than the mother with that?
No, you don't.
Yeah.
You don't
But kind
necessarily.
of
Go ahead. I'm listening.
made a beast law on
Oh,
that.
let me see. It will be a difficult roll, but let me see what you rolled. Oh, you can make a beast roll.
I was just checking.
Yeah, I thought you already made it. I have my chat window somewhere else. You can make a beast roll when you hear about these insects and this mother thing. It's possible can do it. It'd be a pretty difficult roll, so I'd probably have you make it at -4. Oh my goodness.
Nice.
Oh, that's a time to make a roll there with a 1. Can'dho,
Mm-hmm.
I'm not certain how you know, but you know most everything about what's happening in the Baegan territory. Why do you think that is? Before
I can think of a decent explanation that would rely on things that aren't public knowledge
right? I mean,
concerning Can'dho's background.
players can keep
And
that from their characters, but we've been hitting on it, many times.
okay. There are some very strong air quotes around the word ogre when referring to Can'dho. And I think everyone here knows that ogres, trolls, and goblins are all the same species, just goblins are the babies, and They go cocoon up in the forest, and if it still has a brain when it hatches, it's a troll, and if it doesn't, it's an ogre. And Can'dho is an exceptionally smart, air quotes, ogre. And the trolls tend to live in the depths of Davokar. And so probably quite well acquainted with some of the darker secrets of the forest.
Yeah, the barbarians probably know. I think I don't know if a non-Huldra would know, but the life cycle of the elves kind of mirrors that, how much common knowledge that is and what stages they go through. But yeah, so you think Can'dho is from that area deeper? Or he has information regarding that kind of activity?
He's fairly nomadic, so he might have passed through other troll communities, talked with them, gotten their stories. Like, I don't maybe live there for a little, in the deeper bits of the forest for a little bit. Lived there, maybe not super long, but long enough to be like, yeah, that's probably not a sensible thing to do. Let's avoid it. And hear stories and things like that.
So what he hears or what he knows is that the mother is a old elf who has gone astray due to the darkness of Davokar and has used her magic for whatever reason. He doesn't know why. And that the black plague and insects that are attacking and troubling the Baegans are her children. And that she lives somewhere deeper in Davokar, and from her nest, like a brood queen, more and more of these blighted insects are created. And perhaps Can'dho, as he was traveling south, this had just started. Like, he had heard about these black insects. He had heard about this mother elf, this kind of ancient elf near the end of her life cycle or stage, who had for some reason succumbed to Davokar itself, or corruption, or he has no idea why, but started creating this kind of brood of her children. When he moved south before he met the group, this was kind of just beginning, or maybe he was up there, months ago, and he had heard stories of this from his people as a cautionary tale, number one, perhaps, of how crazy even elves can be and the darkness above and Davokar, and to be careful, or to not go in that area, which he avoided, or as information for him just to be general aware of, that may become useful in his journeys. Would Can'dho have any questions about that? Since you rolled a 1, that's right. He knows who the mother is, what the mother is, what she's creating, and she has a nest somewhere in Davokar in that region, but not necessarily where that nest is.
You might ask how long the bugs have been attacking the Humies.
The first attacks probably happened a couple months ago. They were kind of forays. That he would probably know that, he'd heard maybe that some containment perhaps from his people had occurred as they attempted to go in a different route. And part of the reason why they are now attacking Bayegan territory is that they couldn't go that other route. They couldn't go towards Can'dho's people, and so forcibly they were made to create and make territory from themselves on the surface towards the Bayegans. The the incursions into Baega has probably been the last 4 months and has only recently started to become more and more difficult as they've attacked small settlements or small Baegan camping areas.
Okay. Okay.
That probably makes the most sense of why he knows all of this.
Yeah. But continue the trend of Can'dho not being such a good person. He is unlikely to share the full breadth of this knowledge with everyone else.
That's somewhat expected. Does he pipe up about the insects, or when he's asked by the High Chieftain to perhaps take on one of these tasks, does he step forward for that one with, or add his voice to Adela about the Baegan difficulty with these black brood insects?
Only to opine that they're really annoying and it takes forever to clean off the their guts when you crush them. Like, it kind of stinks.
So Adela, is interested in this Baegan issue. Can'dho, do you throw your cards in with her, or do you? Does he have a preference? Does he think I don't know if he would really care about the SARs.
No, Can'dho doesn't.
Does he?
Actually, Can'dho doesn't have any preference for any of these missions. Like babysitting elves, that's boring. Helping the humans, that's boring.
Is he more interested in just bashing things, and that he would?
He's kind of just gonna go with. He's gonna go with the group to bash things. He's not going to share information unless it's directly helpful.
Okay. Maybe he would sort of lean towards Adela then, because he knows that's going to require bashing. Necessarily, I guess any of those would require bashing. It's whether he want to bashes some darkness of the Davokar, or when he want to bash his other barbarians.
Oh, bashing Yumis is always fun.
Okay. So maybe SARs are taking Eri-Las back too. How about Guttorm? Guttorm, you're the smallest one in there. The High Chieftain looks at you directly as Adela and Lazarus and Can'dho are, kind of adding their voice, and the High Chieftain knows you now for various reasons. You've lived on Karvosti for a while. You've mucked out the stalls. You've been a laborer. You've done dirty jobs. The Wrath Guards have taken a liking to you most recently. And the High Chieftain looks at you and it says your name, the full your full name. He doesn't even say the word goblin, which is what you mostly get from humans and ambrians and even barbarians. They don't call you by your name, they call you goblin. More recently, the Wrath Guards have been using your name. Sometimes they call you Guttorm Goblin. And maybe not have fully called you by your name, really, but the High Chieftain looks at you and lets kind of things quiet in the chamber and lets Can'dho's rumbles kind of taper off, and Adela and Lazarus, eventually Lazarus ends his second story and wants to really kind of take Eri-Las back, and Adela is making an argument for the Baegans, and Can'dho is Can'dho, and he looks at you, and there's a moment of quiet, and he says, Guttorm. What is it?
Guttorm he's distracted. He doesn't react on his own name in this situation at first.
Yeah, he says it again. Guttorm.
Yeah. Me. And I'm pointing at myself.
Yeah, shakes his head and he goes, "You have done much for us, Guttorm. You have lived with us for years, and you are one of us now, Guttorm. What would you say to your High Chieftain? Which of these tasks would you throw in for with this group?"
Expression of pride in his face. Uh, Anything to help, High Chief.
Yes. Yes. But do you, like Lazarus, feel that you need to return Eri-Las, be part of that mission to make sure the elf gets safely to his people in the Hall of Tears, or do you, like Adela, wish to help the barbarian people in the Baegan clan from this scourge that threatens them from the darker Davokar? If you were given a choice between those two, Guttorm, I would hear which one you would choose. It is important to me.
I do not know, High Chief. It's a tough choice.
Shall you throw dice for it then, if you can't decide?
What did Can'dho choose?
Can'dho waved off.
Oh, he just waved off.
He left it to you as a deciding vote, necessarily. You're probably standing next to Can'dho, you know? You're like, you know, right next to Can'dho, this giant ogre.
No,
you've been
I know what Guttorm does, because he feels a little bit more connected to Lazarus, maybe, and I would follow Lazarus.
He shakes his head. There is much to be gained in taking Eri-Las back to the Hall of the Tears. Will the rest of you join Guttorm and Lazarus? Will you stay together as a group? The barbarian people and perhaps all of Davokar and Ambria need us to prevent war. Will you help secure that Eri-Las returns to his people?
Elves always need babysitting.
Adela, do you say anything?
Lazarus would definitely laugh at that.
Right. Adela, does that sound good to you? Even though you wish to help the Baegan people?
Yeah, Adela will go with the group.
Okay. And so the High Chieftain nods and says, "Well, we have to leave under the cover of darkness, and surely we can't leave soon. It must be in a couple days, 3, 4 maybe, before we can secret Eri-Las through the gate into Davokar. He must heal a little bit, and surely you don't want to go back down the stairs."
You see Guttorm kind of relieved.
No.
Right. And so the High Chieftain gets up and he comes to each of you and he gives you this square gold coin. It's a very odd coin, but it is completely square, and there's nothing on it except for embossed axe on one end. And he kind of presses this coin when he grabs your arms each, doesn't say much, and presses this coin into your hands or into your pockets, and tells you that if you need the High Chieftain, this coin can mend ways and open eyes for those who still hold the High Chieftain, but beware that other people would do you bad to see a coin like this, so you must be careful with it. But if you need help from a Wrath Guard or others that are aligned with stability, then this coin can give you benefit. And he says, I'll call you or send message in 4 days, but we should plan perhaps on day 4 or 5 in the middle of the night that we secret Eri-Las out through the front gate and back towards his people in the deep of Davokar in the east. Does anyone have any questions for the High Chieftain before you separate?
Nope.
Okay. Guttorm, no questions?
No.
Lazarus, you gonna continue your story a third time while you're being ushered out?
No.
No. Adela,
He might
go ahead.
he might repeat one that he thought was, the most impressive blow and say something as he's leaving.
Yeah, right. When the high chieftain's at your shoulder, and he kind of looks at you, and then you see it in his eyes, Lazarus. There's just a little bit of laughter. And
He doesn't roll his eyes.
no, it's this kind of camaraderie, softer kind of, like he's got a young barbarian warrior on his side who's eager for combat and wants to tell him stories of his greatness. Like he's probably heard this kind of story so many times, even before he was a high chieftain, and he gets it. He wasn't always an old man. He kind of puts his hand on your shoulder and slaps your back and smiles and makes a small laugh. And I hear you, Lazarus. Great things you will be, and terrible things too. And Adela, do you do anything or say anything as they separate?
No.
Okay. Let's take like a 5-minute break so I get a drink. Anyone have questions for me? Like, I have no idea what you guys are going to choose, so I don't really necessarily have a plan. I just leave it up to whatever. Anyone have any questions for me before we break for about 5 minutes? All right.
Nope.
RBG, you still with us? You can go have Red Bull in the smoke.
Yep, already did.
All right, 5 minutes, and then I will come back and somehow craft a journey east.
Right. See you in a bit.
All right, if you're there, let me know.
I have a mechanical question or XP question, if we can.
Sure. What is it?
I don't know. Last session was 10 XP or 5 XP?
5.
5, yes. I should have 15 then. But I think I put the XP on the wrong place in my character sheet. I don't know.
Yeah, your character sheet probably isn't quite correct because you only have like total experience you earned, which should be like, I don't know, 65 or something. What you do is you change your total XP in that far left bracket. And
yeah.
And so how many XP did you use to create your character? Remind me. I don't remember off the top of my head.
I don't remember at the top of my head either. I had 10 XP, and for last session I got 5 more, so I should have 15 XP to spend.
You should have 15
that
extra,
I know.
so I think you should have around 7. Right. So you have around 70 XP. I just changed your total to 70, and now you have currently available unspent XP at the far right.
Yeah. And for the adept skill, it was how much?
20.
20. Okay, cool. Thank you.
New purple.
I missed that. Lork, did you? Oh, you said no. You
Yeah,
said
I
no
was,
problem. Okay, yeah. Sometimes my brain is slow. I get there.
it's okay. We
Uh,
value you all the same.
Lazarus, are you here? If you are, just let me know. I'll ask again here in a little bit. Adela, RPG, are you here?
I am.
All right. Joe, you're muted if you did respond, but
I'm
so
back.
all right. So what we're gonna do? You
Right
have
back.
a couple of days, and I thought I'd do a second downtime. Any of the downtime you did that at the beginning of the session where you got something extra like advantage on a bow shot, that carries over until you use it. Obviously you can't keep it forever, but yeah, things like advantage on a bow shot would probably be good to use at particular times, but try to spend it most time. But I thought I'd do a second downtime because you have 3 or 4 days before you're going to be leaving with Eri-Las. Adela, you carouse the first downtime, and surely you could do that again. Barbarians, sometimes the party doesn't end all that quickly, but it does dwindle off. What does Adela do with this 3 or 4 days downtime? She knows she's going to be traveling into an area, Davokar, she's never been. She's heard rumors of the Hall of Tears and the Elves, but no one she knows has ever gone there. What does she do, or how does she prepare in these 3 or 4 days?
Well, I was just beginning to wonder: is there like a blacksmith or market here, anything like that?
Yeah, there is a market. There's really one person who has. There's a market in the Ambrian section, and then there's another one who's an ogre who you've met, Cruel Jaw, or you sort of met when you first entered
Mhm.
Karvosti, who was in his cups and crying about something in the inn. He sells trapping equipment, you know, that sort of thing. There is a blacksmith related to the stronghold. Like there's an outdoor smithy, kind of old style medieval. If you ever seen a medieval castle that had the smithy on the like one wall, but there is a smithy attached to Karvosti too.
Okay, so because I had some loot that's kind of filling up my backpack that I wanted to
Oh,
sell
okay.
and see if I could acquire a staff head. I don't know if that's available here.
But yeah, that's the point. All of the the loot that we took from the various individuals, mainly of Ambrian descent.
Right. How are you going to get rid of that? And how are you going to do it?
Can we just sell it to
Oh, with so
there's
Adela,
Ambrians here, isn't there?
Adela, which loot are you going to sell or try to trade for a staff head, and what would Adela do? How would you know?
Well, I got a halberd
Uh-huh.
that I'm not using that I picked up. There's a some armor as well, but I think I could sell the halberd and Depending on how much I can get for it, I'd probably like try to find a menial job or something. I don't know.
Okay.
I don't know if that's carousing or not. I don't know what that is.
Yeah, carousing is more partying, revelry and carousing. You're more, not necessarily gathering intelligence, but like cultivating a relationship. You're looking at just to get equipment and sell your equipment, which is easily done, and making a little extra coin.
Right.
Okay. Um, would you turn over that equipment to like the smithy at the Karvosti, like the stronghold, or would you try to kind
I
of
think.
sell it
I
on
think.
your own?
No, I'd probably try to just sell it to the smithy, even if it was like a commission kind of thing. I don't really care.
Okay.
Adele's not that too
Yeah,
concerned with money.
the west wing of Thistlehold has a forge of the stronghold. Like I said, it's kind of like an outdoor forge. It's where the slumbering wrath, or near where the slumbering wrath has its quarters. And there's a barbarian blacksmith there named Jorlamar, and he has a few aides that are hard at work for the High Chieftain, mainly for the Wrath Guard, but the High Chieftain, in order to create a sense of calm and inclusion, Jorlamar and his aides at the forge that is attached to Karvosti do help the Templars and certain Ambrian groups, especially bigger ones, or Church of Prios that is going out, even though they don't necessarily like it, when they know they're going out to kind of scavenge in Davokar and perhaps break taboos. He uh, has given orders to Jorlamar and the Forge to do what they can. So Adela would try to make a trade with Jorlamar.
Yeah. If he's either if he just buys the armor and weapons, then I'll just take that. Or if he can make a staff head, that'd be great.
Yeah, I'm looking to see how much does the staff head usually cost. I think what would
It says
happen. Go ahead.
10 thaler.
10 tail, pretty. How much does the goods that she has is she's trading?
Now that I don't know.
Well, what we'll do later is we can figure out the money stuff later. I think Jorlamar would barter with you a little bit. He's in the employ of the High Chieftain, but that doesn't mean he doesn't like a good barter. And nothing's ever free. Uh, First, I would roll.
I would also try to sell off um, some equipment that I don't even remember that we took in the barbarian fight.
Yeah, what we'll do is we'll make a couple rolls, and then we can decide how much money or thaler you have, and even out whatever that is later. What I would have Adela do is make a cunning roll at +3 to see if he's even heard of you. He probably has, but there's so much business going on. Like, does he give you a break because he realizes who Adela is, or has he been told by the High Chieftain to help out? Oh, there you go. Okay. Yeah, he gives you the staff head at cost, or he gives the staff head to you at essentially free, and takes all that other equipment and tells you here, settle up with you once he determines, how good the material is and how much they need it and how much they pay. But he essentially gives you the staff head for free. Jorlamar looks at you and says, well met, kin. Which clan are you from?
Well, indeed. Go ninja.
Go ninja. Ah, I have not been in that country in a very long time. But,
Nor have I.
and, well, hopefully the staff head will suit you well and keep you safe. And he trades you the staff head for the remainder of the gear and we will figure out how much he gives you based on that kind of cunning roll. Do you do anything
Okay.
else with your downtime besides that?
Yes, restock some rations.
Okay, yeah, that's pretty easy done. Do you do any of the downtime actions, which cultivate a relationship, gather intelligence, research? You know where you're you know where you might be going, but you don't know exactly. Or finding your center, like spiritual exercise, you know, calm, balance.
Well, if it doesn't take too long to do the shopping portion, then yeah, I would probably do the calm one.
Okay. No, I think that would be easy. Like you have a number of days. So roll a 2d6 for me. What does she do to kind of prepare and calm herself or find her center as the days are coming?
I think she would. I think she would do the what do they call it, katas? You know, your training katas.
The martial arts stretching practice stuff.
Right.
Is she doing them to fine tune her staff fighting or pole arm master?
She's doing Tai Chi.
Yeah.
She's doing Tai Chi.
Or is she like, you know, doing it to find to strengthen her spirit?
I think she would do it to find strength in her spirit. I think it's while physical, I think it's more mental calm.
Okay.
You know, the routine of doing something that you trained to do.
Yeah, she does these ritual movements. Perhaps they might involve her staff, but it's not really for fighting purposes. The motions and the katas, or you know, flow of it isn't really built for combat. It's more built for opening up her center, and she calms herself down before this uncertain journey with an elf to his people in the Hall of Tears, which she has no idea what that means and what that may entail. And she could take a advantage on one resolute test during the coming travel. How about Guttorm? Guttorm, whose name is now known by the barbarians.
Yeah.
Does he do anything to prepare for these 3 or 4 days before he's going to leave in the middle of the night and try to secret the elf?
He knows he's gonna travel, but he's not smart enough to like prepare for that. But can I train on shooting 2 arrows to have less XP if I'm gonna buy that skill?
Yeah, you could do.
Was that something I could do?
Yeah, you could do that. You've already trained once with that, so I would probably roll 2d6 with +2. See what you get.
2d6 plus 2.
Uh-huh. Yeah, you train just like in the barn. You might find a small spot, but you know, goblin is still a goblin to most everyone except for the wrath guards. You maybe set up a target. You maybe go to the range, which is, you know, up on this like little elevation, you know, the training grounds, and people are moving all around you and they're moving you around. And then, you know, a wrath guard is standing next to you. Everyone's kind of not moving your way. And the wrath guard just looks at you and puts his hand underneath your arm and, Guttorm, come with me. I will find you space. And he takes you, you know, to this other kind of training ground that has some sparse trees over here, which is far quieter and he takes out a little piece of paper target, and he pins it up on the one of those trees in this kind of plateau here you can see on the map. And he smiles at you and says, "This is a good place to practice, Guttorm. I wish you luck." And he pats you on the shoulder, and leaves you amidst those kind of sparse trees to practice.
Speechless at first. After he's a few meters away, I'm like, "Thank you for this," and I turn around and start practicing my arrows.
Yeah, so you can apply another XP when you learn that skill. And as
Nice.
we talked about before, is the most XP you can apply to a skill like that from downtime is 5. So,
Yeah.
So you kind of keep track of that. I'm on your sheet. You can put it on your info or notes or somewhere. I'm
having a note.
liable to forget. Lazarus, you are going to sell some stuff, and we'll figure out what that means. Is there anything you do in downtime?
I would continue to do my research.
Okay.
And I think my character's a little out of whack. I don't know if we rework the character.
Let me look.
I'm trying to figure out how I got 3 permanent corruption.
I do not know. I would have to.
Maybe, I would get 1 from lay on hands, right? And then if I took it to the next level, I'd get another permanent, right?
I don't think so. I have to look. I think you only get it with the first one.
It's when learning, isn't it?
Yeah, when learning. You may get it with strong gift, but I don't know why you have 3. I'd have to go over my notes and try to figure out that.
And I don't know why I would have witchcraft without having any spell associated with it, unless my plan is that I'll have to rethink it. Maybe my plan was to take
Right, you took.
witchcraft spells.
I don't know. Yeah, I don't know why you have witchcraft on there, because I thought you were unaligned.
Yeah, but that's what I was going for.
Mm-hmm.
To give me some flexibility as far as the spells go.
Yeah, I have to look at it and think. I don't remember off the top of my head. You might be able to figure
Like
it out.
if I drop that and take another spell, let's say, that would give me 2 permanent corruption, right?
It should, yes.
And I don't think strong gift would give me, unless
Strong gift doesn't give corruption, does it?
No, it probably doesn't.
Well, it says it's only available to mystics. I don't know if I would qualify as a mystic.
It's only available to like people with a mystical ability. Like you can use it for witch sight and stuff like that. So if you've got an ability that gives you temporary corruption, you can take strong gift.
Yeah, we can sort it out. I have to look at it. I don't remember witchcraft off the top of my head. I'd have to go back and listen to. I have no idea.
Well, and I can just substitute a spell right now, and then that would give me 2 permanent corruption.
Okay.
I'm trying to remember. Maybe I have an expectation of taking more. Try to do a dual spell casting. Being priestly and being mage-like as well.
Yeah, you did have some original discussions that you were going to take different spells and different.
Yeah.
Witchcrafts, wizardry. You were going to take different spells in different kind of arenas, but
Yeah.
So you're going to research. You're going to continue your research.
Yeah. So do I do a roll for each day? 3 days?
No,
or
I'm just counting it as all like one kind of prolonged kind of
Downtime.
downtime. Yeah,
Okay.
seeking out, more information about how to do that elemental essence formula um, as you're preparing to travel or escort the Eri-Las. And you can make a 2d6 roll.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, that's pretty good. Let me look at
Not
your.
bad.
Yeah, so you advance another step
Okay.
with.
So step, I should just write in step 2.
Yeah, I would put step 2.
Okay.
I
What,
don't I
what do
don't
I have to do for that? Is it 3 steps?
yeah, I don't remember. I think we did say 3. I don't remember.
I think we did.
Yeah, I think
I
we
think it
did.
depended on the formula.
Right. But yeah, I think you make solid endeavor. Perhaps
Progress.
progress. You talk to some broken down black cloak in the Ambrian camp. You maybe hit up a Prios priest that's unexpected and get him in his cups a little bit, and he talks about it. Perhaps you even sideline one of the witches who's busy with the injured, and slip in some questions. Do you think Lazarus would do it that way? Is it a sneakier kind of, or would he just be bold and just try to find people, ask a lot of questions? Obviously,
Yeah, I think he would be more subtle, and because he thinks he can have multiple resources in a city or
yeah.
stronghold like this.
Ask all sort of groups, key in on see people that he thinks would have that kind of information or broader information.
Yeah.
Okay. Adela, I believe we did Adela. Okay. Guttorm, Adela, Can'dho. You're waiting for nighttime on this 4th day. Sleeping in the barn with Guttorm. Sometimes they want to use that barn for other horses, but then they decide, no, I probably don't want to wake that ogre because you rattle the barn with your snoring. Guttorm goes off and practices archery. Maybe you see Lazarus around campsites helping a witch once, and in the Ambrian area, and maybe by the inn, and you see Adela practicing some forms that looks odd at the center of Karvosti, silent. She's a good looking woman, so people kind of look at her side eye as she's moving through these forms, especially some of them. Does Can'dho do anything to prepare for this trip? He, just escorting an elf.
I'm gonna do he's gonna do a bit more practicing
For Medicus?
for some. No, not Medicus. It'll be a different one this time. I'm just trying to decide which one.
Can'dho's bouncing around trying to, figure out what these humans are doing.
Yeah, he spends a bit of time watching these humans prepare, like studying how they're doing things, because life in the forest is fairly deeper in the forest. There is some planning, but there's so much shit going on there that it's a lot of just reacting. So all this sitting around and waiting for things, he's doing some people watching, thinking, oh, that armor that they're putting on, that's quite. Seeing how they're doing it, it's not just some thicker carapace of a tough creature strapped to your back. It's actual overlapping, and he's gonna start putting that mighty cunning of his to expanding his tactical understanding. and try and get some XP towards the tactician ability.
Oh, yeah. Can'dho probably walks out of the barn and he sees some wrath guards and he sees some Templars and he sees them marshaling his troops and
You've gone quiet.
yeah, I noticed. I heard you go on. He walks out of the barn and he sees some wrath guards. Maybe they're discussing, you know, what they saw at the battle, and maybe they're making comments about sometimes disparaging and sometimes, you know, knowledgeable about how the Prios men and the Ambrians were fighting against the elves, and maybe even see the Templar or two, you know, commanding some guardsmen or, you know, on kneeling down with a dagger and, you know, drawing in the dirt about what occurred the last few days when they were, or that day they were fighting the elves, talking about tactics and false moves and why they had to back up against the ramp, and trying to learn some ideas of martial leadership and lore and how these Ambrians do that sort of thing. And I'd have you roll at 2d6 to see how well he picks that up. Oh, that's pretty good. Yeah, so he can. He's watching them, and the Templar may give him a side look, but realizes that there's nothing he can do about it. His men don't seem to mind this big giant ogre watching, and he kind of shrugs in his white armor and keeps talking about troop movement and tactics and flanking and legion movements and that sort of thing. And he picks up some knowledge about tactics, how to think about a battle, and can apply 1 XP to tactician.
Okay. Can'dho also like retrieves and surreptitiously smuggles the bag of like 8 suits of Templar armor that they acquired when a bunch of Templars decided that fighting an ogre is sensible.
Yeah, so he has 1 Templar armor and I think 6 suits of guardsman armor, you know, spearman armor, because I think they only
I
fought.
think I was fighting in that fight as well.
Yeah,
I think,
that's where we got most of our loot, and it was like, oh, well, how much can we carry?
right.
Right.
Look at the ogre.
So you go back to the
like,
barn and you pick up all this stuff. You got to roll a cunning test. Oh, your cunning's pretty damn good.
Yeah, cunning's my thing.
Yeah, to kind of get it. Where are you taking it? Oh, you were really good.
This is doing much the same, like selling of unnecessary equipment. But it's like taking it to the edge, going, no questions. I know you need this.
Yeah, I think Jorlamar at the forge, you know, Adele is already kind of, but you come in and he doesn't even see you at first because somehow Can'dho carrying these sets of armors and Templar armor, like he's trying to hide from the Ambrian seeing it because Templar armor is obvious. He like sneaks into the forge and Jorlamar is there and his assistants are running around and there's obvious other armor and Ambrian armor about because Jorlamar's got a lot of work to fix them after this battle, even though most of the barbarians didn't necessarily. And then he sees you, Can'dho, and he looks up and down and he says, and he hears you offer the armor, you know, no questions, and he looks at you and he gets this little smile on his face. Just for a second, you realize that Jorlamar the barbarian 100% approves of Can'dho. Whatever Can'dho did to bring this armor in, he nods his head and he goes, stick it over there with those others. They won't realize that it wasn't from the battle. Then I will, you know, return it to the Templars. And kind of slaps you, you know, on the side. Jorlemar's a pretty big dude, but not nearly as big as Can'dho, and slaps you on this side, and he goes, just tell me, did you get those by your own hands? Is the blood on them the way you found them or the way you took them?
This helmet wasn't crushed when I met its wearer.
Yeah, that's probably what he probably laughs just like that. Right. Over in the corner, ogre, over in the corner. No words from me, no words from my apprentices either. And he will sort out like how much to give you, but you suitably impressed him, so you're probably going to make a fair bit of regular coin. It won't necessarily be total amount that they're usually sold for, but it'll be higher than usual, just because of how cunning and crazy Can'dho suddenly appears in Jorlemar's forge. Anything else?
That's Can'dho's downtime.
Yeah, so you eventually get summons from the High Chieftain, and you have no trouble going through the front entrance of Karvosti. I've put everyone kind of on the map. I brought up the main map, so you're all there. I'm going to move you for just a second. And you come into the throne room, and the High Chieftain is already there. And he sits up, grabs his sword, but doesn't necessarily put it in the sheath. The man is never without a sword. And he motions you to follow him. And he takes you down a hallway, down a couple doors, and then there's a door at the far end, and he opens this kind of wooden door, goes in there, and you find yourself in this kind of small library. It has a fair number of books and scrolls. The High Chieftain is fairly educated. He's been doing this job a fair amount, and it's the stronghold's library, which may take some barbarians aback that there's actually a library at Karvosti. But Eri-Las is looking over a map that he has spread out on this big oak table, carved oak table with just a big center piece that holds it up, and there's this large map of Davokar out. And he looks up at you, and he nods. These are good people, High Chieftain. Are all of you here to take me back to the Hall of Tears?
Aye. We are.
Even you, Ambrian. But then again, you have shown the truth of your blood.
Ain't it red like the rest of them?
I will continue to see this through.
He looks at each of you, Lazarus, the ogre, Can'dho, Guttorm the goblin, and Adela, and he goes, well, we do have quite a bit of travel. Very few go to the Hall of Tears, and I'm not certain which way to go or which way, but you are my guides, and I would give you choice then. Any way is dangerous. It will take a couple of weeks to get there, and there will be many that may not want to see us return. And he kind of shows you a map, which is kind of like the main map you can see on Foundry. And he kind of points, we must go to the east, near the mountains, which you call Blackmire Pitch, which is here. And there are a number of ways to go. We could go north of the temple, which some Ambrians call the Sun Temple, and cut south of this ruined city of Odaban, or we could follow out Malgamore River past the Black Leech Rift. Each of those has benefits, but if we go north into the forest, it is less likely there would be as many prying eyes. It's a much more difficult route. We should probably try to avoid the Sun Temple or the ruined city of Odaban. If we go along to Malgamore, there may be more trouble from those who are seeking us. I would seek your counsel as those who are traveling with me and who must share the danger. Which route you feel would be better?
So, river, the temple. What was the other one?
I
So
will.
it's two routes.
I will draw kind of one on the map. You see that?
I speak up by saying that the quickest way.
Yeah.
I guess it's probably the river.
Yeah. The other way is this way. Whoa. Oh, it's really acting weird, huh? So those are the two routes. Can you see them?
Yeah.
Right. So one through the forest, north of Sun Temple, south of the ruin of Odaban, towards the Black Pitch Mire, and then not necessarily a faster route, but a route that's harder to get lost on, following the Malgamore River all the way to Black Pitch Mire. The High Chieftain kind of taps on the map and says, yeah, Malgamore is a good route, but there may be many that hunt you along it. But the route through the Sun Temple, it's hard to tell of which one is faster. Both of them has their dangers. You can get lost in Davokar. There are other dangers in the forest, but you're less likely to find those that are hunting from you. Either way is a risk. Adela, what do you think?
Is the Sun Temple the one that we passed by before? Or is that not? Or is that something different?
No, none of you have really been to the ruins of the Sun Temple. It's called the Sun Temple, but the ruins of the Sun Temple, or the ruined city of Odaban. You've heard of them. That's why they're on the map. Same sort of thing with the Earth Towers of Black Leech Rift. You know that's a site of excavations and discovery, but none of you have done that. I don't believe any of you have been fortune hunters into deeper Davokar.
Well, I kind of like the idea of the Sun Temple route.
It ain't that sunny.
Lazarus, you haven't been in Davokar long. I'm not certain whether either route seems more or less dangerous or more or less quicker to you. You probably have no idea necessarily. What would Lazarus say?
I think considering his failure as a pathfinder, I think he would think that the southern route would be more plausible. But that's, he shares that, but is willing to take other people's thoughts into consideration. So
Yeah, Lazarus speaks truth. You would be relying on him to guide you through the forest. He's got to do the majority of that job. He favors the Malgamore because it's less likely if you get lost, you might be able to find your way. There is a little bit more risk that if you get lost in the deeper part of north of the Sun Temple or south of Odaban City, that you could get lost for weeks and die in the middle of the forest. And the High Chieftain kind of looks at Lazarus and says, that is a consideration. If you stick to the river, it is hard to get lost towards the Black Pitch Mire, and getting lost in deeper Davokar does have its distinct risks. Guttorm, what do you say?
Guttorm, looking at Lazarus, a little bit worried. You think you can find a way?
if I'm able to rely on the river for a good portion of the travel.
But I'm meaning through the forest.
You mean the northern
Yeah,
route
the
that he showed
northern.
us?
Yeah.
No, I don't feel that's an option.
Well, the river then.
All right. Can'dho, Lazarus, really prefers a river more for.
The river has been advertised as the way that's most likely going to get you in trouble and have you run into people.
Right. That too, but
Oh no, I was pointing that out as it's not a detractor.
right. That's what I thought you were doing. So Can'dho's all for going along the
You're
river.
just pointing that out. You're just pointing that out as a matter of fact. You mean?
Yeah, that's a comment for Jean to be aware that Can'dho is going to pick a fight if there is a fight to pick.
And I probably quip up with, how much will combat slow us down? Not a whole lot.
All right, then. I think that it's the river route. Eri-Las looks at you and kind of shakes his head and agrees with Lazarus that it makes sense perhaps to travel along the river's edge, keep a landmark too on our side, and it could perhaps make travel faster, perhaps more dangerous. Lots of things come to the river, but nearly not as dangerous as getting lost in Davokar itself. And he agrees that the river route seems to be the best option. And you come to an agreement to leave that night in the middle of the night to begin your travel, taking Eri-Las to the Hall of Tears. And the High Chieftain, agrees and says, "Well, in the pitch black, come, and then we will try to secret you out the front gate." And that will be the plan. Anyone have any questions before we start trying to sneak out of Davokar, out of Karvosti? No?
Nope.
All right, so what am I going to do is I'm going to roll 1d4. Number 1 is Lazarus. Number 2 is Adela. Number 3 is Guttorm. And number 4 is Can'dho. I'm going to roll 2 1d4s. They're going to be for a cunning check and stealth check. Stealth check. So it is a 2 and a 1. Oh, okay. So it is Adela and then Lazarus. So Adela, everyone meets under the cover of darkness. You're at the front gate of the stronghold of Karvosti, and Eri-Las comes out. Now he's in a long cloak, trying to cover the fact that he's an elf, because mayhem could ensue if an elf is seen leaving Karvosti by any Ambrian, definitely by a Templar or a church, a priest from the Church of Prios. And so the group, with a couple wrath guards perhaps on either side, go walking towards the gate. And I would have Adela roll a cunning roll as far as looking out to see if there's any watchers or who else is up this late at night. Yes, so Adela, you see some Ambrians. Perhaps they're coming back from drinking at the inn, really late night. Some of them are staggering. You see a Templar returning from the gate. He's not necessarily on watch, but they kind of man a gate watch themselves, as you might expect, and not leave it to the wrath guards. And what does she do when she sees this trouble that they may interact with as they're trying to spirit the elf to the front gate?
So outside of telling the rest of the guys, there be a way to like dip around them,
Yeah, sure. You could
perhaps?
lead. You could perhaps lead the group. You know, you could change their course a little bit slyly, not making it very obvious, to kind of avoid cross and pass with the Ambrians who are staggering back to the camp and the Templar who's had just switched watch. And I think Adela can maneuver the group around them because of that cunning roll. She recognizes the danger. If that's, that would be an obvious option.
Yeah, that's what I'd like to do then.
Okay. And the second D4 is for a stealth roll. You approach the gate. Adela kind of moves you around the returning guard and Templar guard and these drunk Ambrians, and kind of ekes the group around that chance of getting caught. And you approach the front gate, and there's a Templar guard there, and she's kind of standing there. She had just on watch in this middle of the night, and Lazarus recognized that the Templar is there, and it's a Templar and two Wrath guards that are the only people up at the gate this early, this late at night, because it's pitch black. There's probably torches by the gate, and they got to pass right by the Templar. Lazarus is on one side of the elf Eri-Las and realizes they're gonna have to walk right underneath them. You're gonna have to make a discreet roll of some nature, but how would you do it? What would you do as you approach this lone female Templar at the gate, on that side of her, with Eri-Las kind of in the middle of the group?
I would probably kind of hit on her as we leave and say something to the effect of, when I return, which would be swiftly, maybe we could meet at the bar.
Right. So
And I would kind of wave goodbye as I continue to walk.
Okay. I think that's a persuasion roll. It's not really a stealth or not really a discreet or cunning or quick, or it's a persuasion roll, like you're laying it on thick.
Right.
And
Straight up.
yeah. What I want you to do to decide if it's straight up or not is roll a resolute test, and we'll see if she's heard. We'll see if she's heard of Lazarus.
Okay.
Yeah, Lazarus, she's heard of you. And she looks at you and she goes, "You're that crazy man that put your foot on the abomination. Like you killed it all by yourself."
That's me.
Huh. Have you killed many things that big, Ambrian? Brother.
Of course I have. I'm an Ambrian.
Right. So I would let you roll that persuasion at +2. She kind of looks you up and down. She looks you up and down. You get, she gets a little grin in her eyes. You don't really see it on her face yet. And the group starts marching down. Oh, shit.
Oh, Jesus Christ. Oh. Maybe she's a lesbian.
Nope. Lazarus, you sidle up to this female Templar in her white plate, and you lay it on thick. And at first, you see the smile in her eyes start. She gets little crinkles on the edge of her eyes, like you're bantering with her, and she's a Templar, and Templars are warriors, and just like all warriors, they banter, and this is part of the business. But something tips her off. Something in the way you move, something in maybe the directness of it or how you position your body. She realizes something's up, and it's a slow action first when she puts her hand on her sword, and then she looks past you. You see her eyes look past you, and perhaps she sees Eri-Las's face and realizes that it's the elf, and she pulls her sword and makes a scream, or a battle cry, essentially, because she was down in the front, and all you hear from her at that moment is she says the word traitor as she goes to go barreling past you. I'm gonna put her on the map though here in just a second, and we're gonna go to initiative. What would you do, Lazarus, if you're standing there in front of her? What would he do as he knows he just failed, and she's seen the elf, she's drawn her blade, she's
I would probably try to quickly continue the conversation, say not so fast, but if there's no reaction, obviously, draw my weapons.
Okay. Guttorm, Adela, and Can'dho, you see this happen. You're kind of bracketing Eri-Las. You get up to this Templar. There's Wrathguards a little bit in front of you to the gate. You got Eri-Las in the middle as you're escorting it, and this lone Templar guard shouts and draws her sword. Guttorm, what would you do?
What you don't do? Guttorm looks at Can'dho, and I think you should knock her out.
Can'dho, you're probably near Lazarus as you're walking out. I'm sort of putting you in relative order. Lazarus is on the other side of this Templar, which I put on the map. You can see Lazarus tries to make small talk, tries to take the Templar's eyes off the group, and it's obvious she sees he fails somehow, and you see the Templar pull her sword and begin to move towards Eri-Las. Guttorm looks up to you to try to see what you would do. What would you do, Can'dho?
Don't kill her now.
Can'dho's malicious smile is now slightly less malicious and a bit more upset. What's the?
I would speak up in a loud voice, subdue her. Not super loud though.
Just shouting out opposition. Just sort of like step forward whilst she's running towards us, do like a lariat thing to knock her down.
Okay.
Slam this Templar on the ground.
So you would try to. Sorry. So you would try to tackle her.
Yeah.
Okay. And how about Adela? You're kind of near Eri-Las on the other side. You're trying to scoot by this female Templar who obviously has no love lost for the elves, and You hear the scrape of steel. You see Can'dho suddenly move. Lazarus is still trying to talk her down, yells out to subdue her. What would Adela do?
I would move to juxtapose myself between the elf and the Templar.
Okay.
This way, I'll just guard the elf.
All right. So what I did was I put everyone in combat and did initiative. Lazarus, the female Templar, pulls her sword, sneers at you and calls you a traitor, and is going to push past you and strike at Eri-Las. I'm going to move Adele for just a second. Adela you feel Adela.
Right, but I go first, right?
Yeah, you go first. You feel Adele come up beside you. Can'dho kind of getting around the other side to perhaps do something and presumably subdue the female Templar, though you never know what Can'dho will do. What does Lazarus do?
Subdual damage if possible, or try his best to
Okay.
pull the blows.
So you draw your weapon and try just to knock her out.
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, with the flat of the sword.
Right. So you could.
I guess you can't really use a stiletto for the
No.
subdual damage.
Yeah, you would have to use a bigger weapon. Well, you could use a stiletto, like you're trying to hit them with the pommel,
Maybe
like
the pommel.
the edge of it as she's trying to push back to you. You're trying to hit her in the head with it. I think that's reasonable.
What I hit. Wait a minute. I have him highlighted. Why is it not working?
Yeah, I see you have it highlighted. Are you hitting the? Are you just doing a regular attack roll?
I'm hitting the dice.
Let me try for you just a second.
Right? Isn't that enough?
Choose a target. Oh, I gotta choose a target too. So let me target it too.
Or am I supposed to just click on the weapon? I forget.
Yeah, you click on the weapon. Click on stiletto.
Okay.
That should be.
Okay.
That's probably
on the sword first.
You target. Yeah, there you go. Okay. Yeah, you go to strike her, and she probably puts up an arm as you try to hit her with the bottom part of your stiletto, and you catch her across the cheek, but it's not really a lot of damage. It's kind of a glancing blow because she kind of deflects it as you come in, and Can'dho is circling around the other side of you.
That's my first attack. So
Yeah,
that was
okay.
technically that was the sword.
Okay.
Weak.
Yeah, you missed that one. You probably you hit her twice, and now she has her guard up. And you miss. You get her once. You get her with the first one, but then she's ready. She's ready as you try to double up, try to strike her again, and she gets her hand up fast enough to prevent that second one as you try again. Can'dho, you're rolling around the other side of Lazarus. He tries to strike her with his stiletto, trying to take her down, hit her over the head, and in some fashion knock her out. But he just doesn't find a lot of purchase, and she's very quick. What does Can'dho do? You're muted, by the way.
Thank you. Can'dho is going to put that little bit of tactical insight into his mind, and as you people say knock her out, like subdue her, and it's gonna sort of grunt and like not happy with that turn of events. And go for a knockout blow headshot
Okay.
on this Templar. So as an attack from advantage. So the knockout blows from the advanced player guide.
What does it say?
So advantage from the flanking.
Yeah.
And so now roll 1d12.
Okay.
If it's less, not knocked out.
Okay.
Unless, wait.
Yeah, if it's lower, I roll against the damage value.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't get to ignore the armor for this.
No. And so,
Yeah, so
I think she would still take
she
6.
hasn't. No, I don't deal damage.
Okay.
Oh, wait. The target's knocked out. Yeah.
So what happens? What does Can'dho do, and how does he fail? To knock out this small human Templar in white armor.
Normally, I don't bother about trying to leave the head intact, so it's kind of just a dunk.
Yeah.
Just like the over careful bonk.
Can'dho's never really held back. Like he's not used to like keeping things alive when he hits it. And I agree. That's probably what happens is he hits her too softly. He doesn't know it's either, kill it, but there's no other option. And so when he decides to learn this other option to just knock him out, he is just way too light, and she shrugs it off. Probably doesn't even phase her. Lazarus attacks her. Can'dho tries to knock her out, and it's just it's like he's batting butterflies. Like, Adele is standing on the other side of Lazarus. She sees Lazarus try to hit the Templar in the head a couple times. She has no idea what Can'dho's doing, because it's like he's hitting her with the flat of his hand, or something, and he doesn't even have an effect. She is moving towards you, and Eri-Las trying to get by both you and Lazarus. What does Adela do?
So did it move up, or is it just? Am I looking at it weird?
No, I moved it just for narrative sake. That you're close enough.
Oh, but there's still distance between us, right?
Right. You are still between her and Eri-Las. I'm gonna probably put Eri-Las here back behind Adele, and she's kind of in that position there. You guys are trying to buffet her and keep her away from Eri-Las. You close in on her as she has her sword out, and trying to take her down quietly. The only one who's not necessarily up front is Guttorm.
Okay. Well, in that case, because we're not trying to kill this person, right?
Right.
So I will try to do a knockout like Can'dho tried.
Okay.
Which is just roll a d12, right?
No. You make an attack against them, and if they roll a d12, and they're knocked out if the d12 value is lower than your damage.
Okay.
Right. So knockout really requires you to be able to do a fair amount of damage.
Yeah, which that is. That's a
Yeah, that is a
good
fair
blow.
a fair amount of damage because you're rolling a d12. It doesn't necessarily work like you could do it with a bow, perhaps, or that sort of thing. But it is dependent on the strength and the martial ability of the character. So she'll roll a d12 against Adela's staff hit, and if she rolls over it, she shrugs off that staff hit, and she rolls over. You see. All right. How does Adela knock her out? How does that happen? She shrugs past Lazarus, trying to hit her in the head a couple times. Can'dho does this, half-hearted, unknown effort to put her down. And Adela, how does she do it?
So I imagine as she tries to avoid Can'dho's, big meaty maul coming down on her, all I did was just take the staff and just a straight jab to her jaw. Hit that little sweet spot on the chin. Down she goes.
Knocks her out. See her head snap. Lazarus probably sees her head snap. Can'dho maybe sees it knock back, and she goes down in a crumple of flesh and white plate mail. You just hear her crash to the ground. Her sword goes splaying. Eri-Las is in the back, and he puts a hand on Guttorm, and he looks down. He says, "Guttorm, friend, what do we do now?"
Let's move swiftly out of the area.
Yeah, we should move.
Guttorm's standing there, and the two Wrath guards who are guarding the gate are suddenly there with their weapons drawn, and they look down at Guttorm, and they look at the rest of you. They realize they know what you're here for because they've obviously been told in advance, and they look down at the Wrath guard, and you see one of them spit, and the other one says, "High Chieftain," and he starts cursing, and he looks up at you and he goes, "I don't know how we're gonna take care of this."
Oh, it's quite easy, my friends. Let's get some rope, tie this one up, and we'll just knock you two out and tie you up.
He laughs at you. You suggest that you overtook two Wrath guards, and you wish
a superior force in number have rendered you useless in your combat.
He kind of scratches his head. He looks up at the everyone that joined. He looks down at Guttorm. He looks at the big ogre Can'dho. He looks at Adela, and she offers to knock them out and tie them up, and he doesn't really look certain. He looks over to his other, and the other one kind of shakes, shrugs a little bit, and thinks about it for a while, not necessarily certain if that's a good idea. So what I would have Adela do, so she has force in numbers, is roll a persuasion at +4.
Right on the money.
He looks at Adela, and the other one shakes his head and shrugs his shoulders, and he goes, "This is going to cost you, I think, though. The story's going to get out, Ambrians are going to be on your tail. You are good with this, yes, as a group?
Yeah, we're fine with that, I think.
And he goes, well, don't make it hurt too much. And don't tie the ropes too tight.
Fear not. You'll be able to get out as soon as you wake up.
And when you get to the bottom, tell the ramp guard that we want to see him. Here, come up, and so we're not, out of our post for too long. Agreed?
Agreed.
Okay. Everyone good. You're going to knock out the wrath guards, tie them up, leave them in a lump at the gate, go down the ramp, tell the lower gate guard that that they're needed up topside, and be on your way. Okay. That's what you do. It takes a little bit of time. The wrath guards look at you, and you hear them muttering a little bit, and they take off their axes, put them on the ground, and get themselves ready, and they turn their backs away from you and kind of look over their shoulder and says, all right, now just don't hit me too hard to break my skull, right? And looks up at the ogre Can'dho and kind of goes, one of you are doing it, correct? Not the ogre. And they let you knock them out and tie them up. You go down the ramp, and there's a wrath guard about 3/4 of the way down the ramp, which is not uncommon. There's usually a couple ramp guards, but for whatever reason they just have one on the ramp, and you pass them on the way. Guttorm, what do you say to the ramp guard as you pass with your group?
I nod to them and try to be respectful and thanks them for letting us pass.
Okay. Do you let someone else tell them that they're needed up at the gate? Is Guttorm on any of that? How does he feel when they get, the wrath guards? The wrath guards and Guttorm are, getting tighter. Really, he probably knows quite a lot of them more by name, and
Guttorm is a little bit afraid for the relationship to get broken.
Okay, and so he doesn't tell him. He lets one of the others tell him.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah,
he doesn't say anything.
The wrath guard in the middle, on the ramp, his name is Arkan, and you know Arkan pretty well, and Arkan, claps you on the shoulder and says, all right, Guttorm, you stay safe. I want to see you back. I want to have some cups with you, aye?
Aye.
And you follow past them, and eventually someone, Adela maybe, or Lazarus, tells him that he's needed up at the gate, and he gets a little bit of, a crinkle in his brow, but, the party is expected to come down. He was warned in advance. That's why there's only one ramp guard, because they didn't want the 3 ramp guards they usually have. The less eyes, the better. And he watches you go down the ramp, and eventually, once you're near the end of the ramp, Arkan turns around and, plods up towards the top to find what you left for him at the gate: two tied up wrath guards and a tied up Templar. And you all are going to travel up the Malgamar River. It's kind of the middle of the night, and you don't necessarily need a Pathfinder roll at the moment, because you can follow a trail down to the Malgamor River and the bridge, which I'll bring up so you can see. And that's the easiest. Now, it's the middle of the night. You probably get to the bridge 3 hours after midnight, give or take. What would be the plan? Would you travel through the night? would you camp out? You're roughly here, what's called the bridge camp. You come down the path towards the bridge, and you're kind of there where the company um, marker is. What would you do knowing that you've left Wrath Guards and a Templar bound up at the gate when you reach the bridge at 3 in the morning?
Traveling.
Keep traveling?
Yeah, because I'm sure somebody will send somebody after us, and the more distance we can get, the better.
Yes.
Sure, Adela. Roll a d6. All right. You are going to travel. Yeah. You're going to travel up the Malgamore River, and what we'll do is stop here. Try to keep the sessions around 3 hours. And you're going to travel up the Malgamore River when we return towards the Hall of Tears, which none of you know necessarily where to go. And we'll end the session there. Hopefully you had fun. I had fun. It was more of an RP session, except for maybe really far at the end. Anyone have comments or questions for me?
No, it was a lot of fun.
Okay.
Yeah.
We talked two of the barbarians, like greatest warriors, into letting us punch their lights out.
Right. I thought it was pretty funny, Lazarus. I typically, when I have a setup like that, I don't determine the skill you're gonna roll before you do that. I ask you what you're gonna do and see how that goes. And it was just shy of working. And she knew you, so I gave you a bonus. But when you rolled a 20, it just, was going to go south, which I let the dice kind of decide, which was fun to do, have that kind of combat near the end to get past, which...
That's what Lazarus gets for hitting on a married woman.
Right. married to her job, the Templar.
Right.
A 20 comes out at the wrong time, and you're like, oh my goodness. But that was pretty fun. How did you all feel about like the downtime? We don't do a lot of downtime play like that, the rolling. So I tried to incorporate it this time because you're obviously at Karvosti. Do you all like that sort of thing, or
I did.
Okay. Yeah.
I don't mind. I think it's an added dimension.
Yeah, I think it's one of the better things to do rather than to like skip over time or whatever.
Yeah, and it does kind of add improv role playing, developing connections, which I tried to do with each of you, like because that is all on the spur, and so things like Guttorm's connection to the Wrath Guards, and when he fails that role, a Wrathguard, brings him to a Wrathguard training area, which kind of cements that and those other ideas, but. I do like it for that, even though I don't necessarily know what's going to happen. Any other comments?
Just so you know, I dropped witchcraft.
Okay.
It took a spell that is witchcraft and I think some other class, but
Oh, you did. That is a good
and
spell.
so I like that spell. And that would give me 2 corruption. So I don't know if there's a calculation mistake or...
I don't know. I have to look at it because I think you set that on your own, but I'll look at your sheet and try to see if I remember. Sometimes I have to think about it for a while or look over my notes. You missed last week on Friday, and larva boil caused some complications during that.
Did it?
Yeah. But it was a fun spell to use. The company didn't use it. It got used on them on Friday night.
Right.
Right. And Barnaby's character suffered it. But it is a kind of fun spell. Guttorm, Mr. Hitachi, any comments? Hopefully you had fun today. I did like your role play of Guttorm. That was fun.
Yeah, it was a more quiet day for Guttorm today, but I enjoyed it. I like the connection with the Rat Guard and
Yeah,
being trusted by them.
the connecting Guttorm when you decided that he's lived there for a while, you know, and his recent escapades. This session also, like I don't have any idea of what people are going to choose. I try to give them a number of different options. You know, the Sar-Ars and the witches, the black insect-like things in Mother, taking Eri-Las back, the you know, a couple other options. So I don't really have a plan until I know kind of what you're doing. And so combat is a little bit less likely in a 3-hour session, depending. You know, I don't like to push that too fast, or you know, I thought I'd role play some of that out and see, you know, what you guys chose. But I enjoyed the session. I enjoyed you all role playing too, even though we didn't do a lot of combat, and some of those sessions kind of swing back and forth. You know, a lot of combat.
Yeah, that happens.
Yeah, not
I mean,
as
I
much.
tend to like a balance, but
Yeah.
you know, we sometimes we have a session where there's a fair amount of combat, and then there's other sessions like tonight.
Yeah, last session was a little bit more balanced. There was more RP with the black cloaks, and then combat, and then RP with the stairs, and then definitely RP at the end where they had to decide what to do. But I didn't have a lot of combat ideas up on Karvosti, and I didn't want to like shuffle you off the plateau.
Yeah.
You know, okay, you're going here to do this, which is a little bit more complicated. But all right, well, I had great fun. Hopefully, you guys will have a great week.
I have a
Sure, I'm here for
I'll
a
see
while.
you tomorrow,
I have a quick
Ray.
question about before I leave the survival instinct.